Hey, this is Joshua, MVA Studio Minneapolis. Today I want to talk about how to improve your typography. This is really for students, maybe even for people who are kind of fresh out of school or people who want to design and are not doing it because they're intimidated by typography. If you went to one of those schools that's obsessed with the rules, you need this. So these are 3 assignments. You can start them tonight. Well, you can start one tonight. You can't start all 3 tonight. You don't need a book. You don't need a textbook. You don't need anything. You just need Illustrator or InDesign or Quark Express or PageMaker, whatever the hell you're going to use, Photoshop. It's all good. Microsoft Word probably is not going to cut it. Assignment number 1, hierarchy studies. Now, when I went to school, no one really explained how simple hierarchy is. It's literally making one piece of information different or more important than another piece of information. And that's it. So we're going to do this in the most simple, fun way possible, because if it's fun, you will do a lot of it. And if you do a lot of it, you will be a better typographer. Go to your local alt weekly newspaper or whatever your favorite club is in town. Find an event, nothing too complicated. Don't do like a carnival or something like that. Don't do like a festival. It should be like a band, 1 or 2 openers, 3 tops, city, time, date, maybe a URL, maybe a couple URLs, but that's really it, the most basic information that we need in order to know about this event. The first thing I want you to do is just take a sheet of paper, look at it, and prioritize what's there. So literally like write 1, 2, 3 and just say like, okay, what's the most important thing, second most, third most important thing? And that's it. Group them in a way that makes sense. So if there's a grouping that's most important, do that. No more than 3 levels. Maybe you could get away with 4. Now you know that you've decided what the hierarchy is. Take the content that you have, copy it into a square Illustrator format. And the reason I say a square is, 1, all those old school Swiss typography books, all the examples were squares. There's a reason for that. It works for learning stuff. Horizontal format makes you do horizontal stuff. Vertical format makes you do vertical stuff. But a square can kind of go wherever you're going with it. So square format. Copy that text in. Everything should be in separate boxes. Every band name should be in a separate box. The city, the date, the time, the URL, all of that stuff should be in separate text boxes, because you want to cut down on your need to like dig into boxes and be like changing the size. Like you don't want to be worrying about leading and kerning and hoobity blah blah. You just want to be able to move the stuff, scale it, make decisions. First exercise, without doing anything tricky, you're not allowed to do color, you're not allowed to do crazy repetition of something, you're not allowed to do stretching stuff. Black type, white background. I want you to use a font, 1 size, 1 weight, black on white. Don't make stuff sideways, but keep it all straight. There's no rule on what the size is, but what you want to do is, just using space and sequencing, start to investigate how to bring that hierarchy to life. These are going to be hard but easy. Easy because there's no decisions to make. Hard because you're going to naturally want to make it look good in some way, and really all you can do is play with space. But I want you to focus on the hierarchy only. Every time you have it resolved, even if it takes 32 seconds to make a composition that feels like, oh, there it is, there's the information in the order I need it in. Take that spread. If you're in InDesign, duplicate the spread. If you're in Illustrator, Shift O, Option drag it, make another one, do another version. Make all the type bigger, but still the same size, still black on white. Maybe change the typeface. Keep doing those studies. My thing would be to set like an egg timer for 10 minutes, 20 minutes maybe, whatever you have time for, and just do as many versions in that time as you can. Once you've done that, start to introduce a variable. So bring in a second size of a font, and then start to rework those compositions. Okay, now you have big and small. How does that affect your hierarchy setup? Again, set a timer. Work like that for another 10 minutes. Then another 10 minutes, add another weight. Another 10 minutes, add another size. Another 10 minutes, add a shade of gray. Notice the one thing I'm not talking about is anything to do with what fonts you use. It really doesn't matter. If you want to use sand, go for it. Just one thing that you will probably end up noticing is that when you're just using that one size, your font is so much more critical because it's providing all the visual intrigue. Because unless you're like a master typographer, you're not going to make awesome looking stuff like this. It's kind of impossible. Continue to add those variables. And maybe, you know, in the show notes, I'll put a sequence in, if that helps. Like it'd be a micro exercise, like do this, then 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 do this. Eventually what you're gonna do, you have a shitload of studies. You might wanna do a lot of save ases for every single different kind of crazy study. Then you're just gonna find whatever stuff is working the best and then do whatever you want just to make it even better. So if it's the one that's only got 2 sizes that's working the best, once you've gone through all this stuff, well, cool, take that, just spend some time resolving it. Like, how do you make this killer? Like, now do you need color? Now do you need to explore more weights within something? So that's exercise 1. That will make you better at typography. And one of the ways that it will do it is that to make hierarchy, you have to make decisions about what you're looking at. So by making something bold, you make it more visual. By taking the space between 2 things, you make it more visual. By grouping things, you make it visual. By sequencing, all the decisions that you make in a completely rational, fact-based way of working are gonna make the work more visual. And just by doing that, that's gonna make you better at your job. And it's especially helpful if you don't think you're a formalist. You'll be making formal decisions, i.e. visual decisions, based on rational things like what's most important, or how can I clarify this little bit of copy if I just add in bold or italics or whatever it might be. A rule for your hierarchy studies. Never enter information, do not turn on guides, do not go into the font palette other than to change the font. Make sure that your Illustrator boxes are set up so that they're not the text boxes, but they're that kind of cool live text thing where you can just click on them, hold shift, and scale them up, okay? Don't be clicking, don't be adjusting the kerning. It's like, it should just be picking fonts, potentially picking weights, and then do everything manually. Because you want to learn how to not be afraid of the type. And that's why it's important just to grab it and make it look good and not be like, oh, I don't know if, 14.2 is a good size with the blah, 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 whatever sort of nerdy stuff people pretend is important. Assignment 2 is gesture studies. So again, a square format. This is an entirely new thing. What I want you to do is just think of the last thing you listened to or a song that stood out to you today. So what song stood out to me today is, oh man, it's an Unsane song. Unsane, Smells Like Rain. It's just that little bit of type. You can have an artist and you're gonna have a song name. You're gonna treat it like it's the cover of a single or something like that, okay? Square format, set a timer, and just play with that type and see what those words wanna do. That's it. Every time you think, ooh, that's cool, resolve it as much as you can, no tweaking, then duplicate your artboard. And then play more, try something else. I would set, well, I'm old, so I set a timer for 12 minutes and can do like 6 versions in that time, and my standards are incredibly low. But maybe set a timer for 20 minutes. Every 3 to 4 minutes, you should be making a new artboard and exploring further. This is how you get good. You cover lots of ground, you try lots of stuff. If you are in a design program and you had to do a foundation year of drawing, how did every class start? You did gesture drawings. Why? Fast, intuitive, impulsive, sharpens your skills. You try lots of stuff. You burn through it. That's what you want to be doing with these. And again, I'll put a show note of this, but if you go to our website, under the experiment section, there's a month's worth of these exercises that I was doing. Do them kind of frequently just to maintain my skill set and to try to do things I haven't done before. The big thing is you want to not be afraid to type. And I don't just mean like, oh, don't stretch it or whatever. but I just mean like just to play with it. Like, so in this instance, like repetition, randomly changing sizes, scaling up, using fonts that suck. Maybe you have to take the name of the band and separate that into separate text boxes just so that you can play with that. But play and play fast and do this a lot. If you do this every day for a week for just 10 to 20 minutes, I promise you by day 7, you will be a different designer than the day that you started. Don't worry about if stuff is good. Don't worry about if it's cool. Don't worry if it's trendy. Do not worry about having a concept. You actually don't want to have a concept. You want to find out what do those words in that particular space, what do they want to do? Like, what fonts let them look cool? Don't worry about what in the world looks cool or anything like that. Like, there should not be concepts. Just play with the type. Treat the words as raw material, like a kind of clay for you just to dig in and see what it can do. Do that as often as possible. If you're in one of these design programs that's like obsessed with the rules, just do this every day for the rest of the time you're in that program. Regardless of what they're doing, you will be a kick-ass designer. Number 3, this is an assignment I haven't given it in a while because I haven't had time in the way that I teach lately, but it's called codes, or I call it codes for visual codes. What this will do is it's going to help you develop subtlety, and it's going to help your eye. It's going to help you have like a better eye for detail. So what I would do is go and find a book of Renaissance typography. That's where I would start. I'd start with Renaissance typography. Anything older than that, you're going to be deep in the woods. So go find some Renaissance typography. Print that page, make a photocopy of it, whatever, but have that page next to you. Open up an Illustrator or an InDesign document and copy that page by eyeballing it. So don't measure it, don't measure the proportions, treat it as if you were drawing from a model. Make a document. If it looks too wide, tighten it up a little bit. Then start setting the type. Keep looking at your type and that. You may have to go and ask people what font you're looking at. And they might be able to tell you some nerdy thing like, oh, well, that's like the original cut of Bodoni. Like, you're not gonna find that, or you're gonna have to pay money for it. But you can try to find a font that's as close as possible. When I say copy it, don't worry about the texture or the wornness of the paper or whatever. I mean, like, understand that typography. Get the tracking right, get the spacing right, but copy it, and don't stop until you can look at the thing you've made and the thing on that paper until they're identical. You doing that is going to do a bunch of things that are helpful for you. It's going to develop your subtlety to what's happening, because like a lot of people will copy some old stuff. So they'll look at like Renaissance typography or classical book typography, and they'll be like, oh, it's a serif and it's centered. And they make this clunky thing that just looks like a grade school report, like by my 6-year-old or whatever. When it's everything within that, which serif typeface, how much space is at the bottom of that page, how much space is between those letters, where the logo is situated on a title page. Do a couple of these. You should be able to print yours out and print out that one and tack them up side by side. And the only difference should really be the fact that this thing that you're copying is going to have a bunch of detail to it that is impossible for you to get just by designing something in InDesign. But do that, and then run through history doing this. So then look at like Victorian advertising, like those wanted posters that everybody copies, but everybody gets super wrong because they don't actually see what's happening. Copy something like that. Copy some early modernist like Theo van Doesburg, Kurt Schwitter's, L. Lissitzky's type graphic design. That Bauhaus stuff that everybody gets wrong because they think it's just about curly, like circular type and not about structure and not about space and not about pacing. Do a piece of Swiss typography. Look at the subtle stuff you have to do with the accidents to actually make it fit. If you're struggling with what materials to use, leave a comment and I'll just send you a zip of stuff that you can look at. Like I'll send you a zip of classical typography, or of early modernist typography, or Victorian wood type, or whatever. But if you do this, you're gonna get this intense amount of subtlety, and that's gonna improve your work. And it's gonna improve your ability to see stuff. And overall, that's a skill that's helpful to have, to understand like the nuance in what somebody is doing. And the other thing is it's gonna make you do counterintuitive stuff. That's one of my favorite things about it. When I had students copying the classical, like Renaissance typography, they're not used to opening the tracking way up. So a lot of times they'll open it up and it'll get to like 200 and they'll stop because it doesn't feel right. And then you come up and you're like, dude, look at that. Like, look at this Bodoni thing. Like, there's a sea of white space in there. And then they do that and they start to see like how that thing is different than how they work, and also how what makes that thing special is those decisions. What makes a lot of that Swiss typography special is the way that they tracked out, or the way they spaced that accident's grotesque. So that's 3 projects that you can do. They don't require a teacher. They don't require anybody to critique you. They don't require a textbook. The hardest part could be in the historical stuff, just identifying the fonts. If you do any of this, since you're working in squares on the first 2, make sure you post some JPEGs of them to Instagram or something, and either tag the MVA Studio or me personally, MVA Joshua, because I would love to see it. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed this. Sorry I didn't show any examples, but I'm busy and I don't really got time to be making crazy presentations. But if you want more information, just leave a comment. I am pretty responsive about getting back to you. Have a good one.